racial identity, race relations, and cultural norms. And today, I am here to challenge the way you think about biracial people in America, specifically those of a black and white ethnicity. But before we get into all that, I would like to show you a few photographs. So, hopefully you'll recognize them. I have a couple historical figures: Frederick Douglass, Jean Toomer, Ida B. Wells, but I also have just some gods and goddesses among us: Zendaya, Bob Marley, former President Barack Obama. And here we have represented civil rights leaders, politicians, authors, writers, journalists, playwrights, actresses, actors, musicians, a former president, and a princess. Now tell me, what could all of these people possibly have in common? Well, like me, they are biracial, and like me, they share a part of a powerful narrative that is being suppressed in America. The biracial narrative is being suppressed because we often are not allowed to embrace the duality of our heritage. And if you don't believe me, for the skeptics in the audience, I have a little bit of evidence for you. Here is a picture of our former president, our former white president, Barack Obama. Now, a couple of you may have cringed or felt bad for me. I messed up while giving a TED Talk. He's clearly our first black president. Why did you say he was white? Well, hopefully you are aware that he is biracial. He was born to a black father and a white mother. And because of this, he is just as much a part of white American history as he is a part of black American history. But because of America's need to divide and separate and segregate and categorize people based on the color of their skin, we often feel uncomfortable saying that he is white because what we see is a darker skin tone. But in saying that we can only call him black, we are suppressing the biracial narrative and the rich, complex nature of America's story. But don't feel bad. We've been doing this for hundreds of years. You see, there's this mistaken idea that biracial history doesn't really start until 1967 with the Loving versus Virginia Act, when interracial marriages were legalized. But the flaw in this is that biracial people have been here the whole time. We see some of the first evidences of biracial people in America on plantations, when white slave owners would rape black slave women, and their children would grow up being despised by both black and white people. To the black slave, the mixed person represented a type of oppressive force because they had the blood of the oppressor flowing in their veins, and they also had privilege because sometimes they were allowed inside the house. And so a lot of times they were called house Negroes, and they were often referred to as mulattoes. But white people hated mixed people too because they represented the intermingling of what then was considered human and not human, something I hope we understand is not the case today. But these children grew up despised, unwanted. There was no freedom for them to embrace their racial identity and who they were, so they often decided to pass, if they could, as one or the other. And this continued through Jim Crow segregation. There were no mixed fountains. There were no mixed bathrooms. There were no mixed lunch counters. Every time a biracial person stepped outside their door, they were confronted with the question, are you black or are you white? And oftentimes they weren't even allowed to answer because America chose for them based on what they saw, regardless of their racial identity and who they were. And in doing this, America successfully suppressed the biracial narrative. And what is unbelievable is that we are still doing this today. Recently, my brother applied for a job at the airport, and he was so excited. But he said that when he was in the process of filling out his application, the lady at the counter asked him his ethnicity, and he said, I'm biracial, I'm mixed. And she kind of smiled and said, I'm sorry, sweetie, but you have to choose. You have to choose one or the other. And in that moment, with something as trivial as an application checkbox, my brother was told that his experience and that his identity was invalid, that it didn't really matter, it was illegitimate, and that he just needed to choose and move on. And when confronted with these kind of situations day in and day out, we are constantly being put in situations where we're having to choose when we are both. And so as a creative writer, I was trying to work through this. I was frustrated. And in my transition to adulthood, I've been trying to process what it means to be a biracial woman in America. What does that mean for me? And how can I communicate this experience? And during the 2016 presidential elections, as tensions in our nation rose and as the media increasingly covered police brutality situations, I noticed that America was becoming polarized. Not to say that it wasn't in the past, but that there was a resurgence of racial tension. And I saw people on media begin to take sides, black or white, and their hashtags and their posts suggested that we all needed to choose sides and that I needed to choose sides. And I didn't understand how, and being biracial, that was even possible. Am I supposed to say that I am only black or that I'm only white? Am I supposed to deny a part of my family, of my heritage? And so I was writing, and eventually it culminated in the spoken word that you heard recently. But before that, there was this pivotal moment where I wrote a very small poem that reflects some of the inner turmoil I was feeling. And it's simply titled, Biracial. My blood is a battlefield where blue and gray coats clash under star-spangled banners and barred flags. My body is a prison where amber eyes bear witness to war that never ceases, seizing minds, wreaking division. My being is torn in two by double forces without mercy. But my spirit softly whispers, there is no war within me. In creating that poem, I was able to capture some of my experience, and the final line is what really held me over. And it's that there is no war within me. And embracing this statement, I was able to embrace inner harmony, because regardless of how people are behaving or suggesting I behave in the outside, I know who I am. I'm biracial and I'm proud, and there is no war within me. And in realizing this, I had to realize that America will never really embrace racial harmony until they can embrace the biracial narrative, until they can embrace the biracial person as the harmony between what historically has been two warring races. Now, in order for us to really move to embracing this narrative, there's so much work to be done. And you may ask, what can we do? Well, there are a couple things. One, please eliminate check one box situations. It's 2019 and I don't know why I need to choose anymore. There are multiple choice boxes now. Let's use those on applications. If you are in control of that, I beg you, please change that. Two, let's be cognizant of language used to describe biracial people. You can see this in history textbooks and also in tabloids and magazines, whether we're referring to historical figures or contemporary figures. If they're biracial, let's call them biracial. Yes, they phenotypically have dark skin, but that doesn't mean that they are solely black. Or they phenotypically have light skin, but that does not mean that they are solely white. They're biracial. Let's acknowledge their story. Let them share a part of their history with us. And three, ask yourself if you have unchecked biases or assumptions. Are you expecting me to act black or act white? Are you expecting me to dress or behave or speak in a way that would say that I am one race or another, which we know is inaccurate anyway? I'm biracial. I'm going to talk biracial. I'm going to speak. I'm going to behave. I'm going to dress biracial, whatever that means. And I would appreciate it if you would embrace us for who we are, because we're going to do our own biracial thing. But it all boils down to this: embrace us for who we are, because we are a part of this story just as much as our black brothers and sisters and our white brothers and sisters. And in accepting who we are, you are accepting the racial harmony that is etched into our very beings. And embracing us, embracing biracial people like me and my family and my friends, You embrace the future, and that future is beautiful. Thank you.